Hello, hope you're all doing well, healthy and safe. Welcome back to Principles of Quantity Surveying. My name is Musa Chitsungo, and before we proceed, again, this is a reminder that this is just an opinion video. It's not contractual advice. It's an opinion from someone who's been in the industry just a few days, let's say. Okay, the last video that we spoke about the traditional lump sum method of procurement. With that one, we said that there's, so to say, a fixed amount for the contract sum, and there's the designs are fully developed, a bill of quantities is done, and the contractor tenders, and the figure that he gives is principally the one that we are going to ideally have, assuming that we don't have any unforeseen circumstances, like maybe the ground conditions being what we didn't expect, or if, for instance, there are no variations, then the amount that he has tendered on then becomes the amount that the client would ideally pay at the end of the project. Then we realize that, okay, there are some advantages that come with that. There's the idea of cost certainty. Like, if you're the client, you know that, okay, this project is going to cost me 6 million. And principally, ideally, you're supposed to pay within that region of 6 million. So you've got that confidence going forward that, okay, this is the amount that I've got in my pocket, this is the amount that I'm going to pay for this project. So it has that advantage. The disadvantage, however, it does take a long time, for the designs to be fully done, for the bill of quantities to be measured. And things change between the time that you start the project and the time that you actually finish construction. So there's that disadvantage in terms of the amount of time that it will take for you to go to site and actually start your project. Anyhow, today we're going to move on and discuss the approximate quantities. It's still within the family of the traditional method of procurement. So we're just going to discuss the method, then we're going to look again at the factors that we said we would be considering when we're picking a method of procurement, and then we're also going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of this method. Okay, so we're going to start with what are the features, what does this look like? Okay, it's almost similar to the traditional method of procurement. However, the difference is we are using approximate quantities. We are not using the precise quantities that have been measured from drawings. Okay, so that's the one feature. And then we come to the reason why we probably have it, or why this feature becomes, so to say, significant, or is what we use. Okay, we normally use it where the design probably hasn't been fully finished, but it's at such a point where you already know what you're going to use. For instance, the specifications are clear and they're not likely to change, right? We already know what kind of floor tile we're going to use. We know what kind of wall paint, what kind of roof material. The design is at such a point, so you're able to actually come up with approximate quantities. But that would be mainly for people with experience in certain projects. For instance, if one has done a similar project, maybe for the same client, then it would be ideal to say, okay, we've done a similar project. Of course, there's going to be small changes, but then we can obviously use the approximate quantities from the previous project, for example, and then we carry them forward. Or even if it might not be the same client, but it could be a similar project of similar nature, almost similar size, then you could actually use the similar quantities or approximate quantities from that project and carry them forward to this new project, even if it's different clients and so forth. But if you already know, or if the client already knows what they want, then we can just adapt the specifications to the new project. Okay, so the important thing, like I said here, is that the rate is the one that becomes contractual, because remember, the quantities aren't fixed, and they're going to be remeasured. They are all provisional. So it means that whether it's superstructure brickwork, you will have to remeasure it on site, right? And then that new quantity is the one that you will use, but the rate has to remain, in a sense, constant, because then, especially if it's a new contractor, then you will need to know what rate are we using, because you can't have a situation where the contractor keeps changing his rates up and down. Then the client doesn't know how much they're going to pay at the end of the day. So the issue about the rate then becomes super important, something to keep in mind, right? And then the other issue with this one is that you can actually do the contract signing well before the design is complete. right? So because you already know what you're anticipating and so forth, so you can actually go out and tender based on the approximate quantities, and then possibly in the period that you're tendering and so forth, the design can actually go forward, and hopefully by the time you're on site, there's enough detail for the contractor to start his work. Okay, so like I said, this can be used where there's repetitive work, which is of similar nature, or it can be done where there's a similar project, or it can be done where there's serial tendering. Okay, serial tendering, we're going to discuss tendering possibly when we finish this topic of procurement. But just a quick note on serial tendering. For instance, if someone has tendered for a stage one or a certain portion of a certain project, a construction project, then they can then tender on approximate quantities for the next phase of the project, because they already know what it is that the client wants. They know the specifications, they're already on site, and they can easily move forward with the project. So that being said, anyway, we're going to discuss tendering methods at another time. So what are the advantages of these approximate quantities? The advantages are that construction can actually start much earlier than it would with the traditional method, because in this circumstance you're saying that we can actually go out to tender even before the design is fully finished. So it means that the client saves on time a little bit, but then the disadvantage is that there's no cost certainty because the quantities are approximate. It means that the contract figure, the final amount, can actually go up or go down. There's no guarantee in this circumstance. Of course, with all construction work, there's no guarantee. However, in this case, it's more likely to go up or go down because you don't know, the quantities are not close to reality as possible. And then the other disadvantage is that all the work must be remeasured. Of course, it kind of follows that, look, we're going to remeasure in any case. But when you've got approximate quantities, it's almost to say there is no room for error. Everything must be measured to the T and with all accuracy. Yes, we follow that same route when we measure everything else. But it's different when you've already measured the work before. It's easier for you to go back and measure on site and say, oh, okay, I measured this to be 5 meters. And when you come back, it's actually 5 meters. You don't query, why is this 5 meters? Whereas if you hadn't done it before, if you hadn't measured it to be 5 meters before, when you come back and you find that it's 10 meters, then you actually have to now, so to say, do an investigation. Did the design change so much? Was it an error from the contractor? Did the client request a variation, and so forth? So at that point, you then need to, in a sense, put in more effort and more work and in making sure that you're doing the right thing for your client, and as well as being fair to the contractor. Okay, there's quite a lot of other disadvantages and advantages of this method. The other one that I can quickly think of right now is that if there are any changes, right, the client is likely to pay more, because sometimes you might not have similar items. For instance, whereas with your traditional method, the lump sum, where you've got a bill of quantities, you'll find that if there are variations, then you might have a similar item within the bill of quantities. But in this case, maybe you actually don't have a similar item. So the variations could also become costly to the client. Anyway, then we can move on to the factors of remember the factors that we spoke about when considering your method of procurement. So yes, time, which we mentioned already, is that the advantage of this method it's got an early start time. And then design development, this one has got the advantage that the contractor can tender before the design is actually complete. So if you're considering an early start on site, then the approximate quantities bill of quantities would then be an option with your traditional method. And then there's the issue of design responsibility. With this method, you could have quite a number of provisional sums, and some of the design can actually be delegated to subcontractors. For instance, maybe the design of the joinery, design of the roof trusses, maybe design of the air conditioning. There's quite a lot of other things that can actually be delegated to subcontractors or other service providers. So at the end of the day, the design responsibility can actually be split between the original design team or the appointed design team and then with the subcontractors. And then the other option, the other issues here with the choice of contract. One has to take care when advising the client which contract they're going to use, because you'll find that the agreement and schedule of contract in Namibia, I don't think it really discusses or gives the option of approximate quantities, although it's almost like a standard, so it's kind of adaptable to that. But you'll find that in other countries, like where they can use the JCT SBC /AQ, the 2011 version. So that's the Joint Council Tribunal for the Standard Building Contract / with approximate quantities 2011. Sorry, so that's the one that is, for instance, the one that actually accommodates approximate quantities. But I'm sure that there are other versions of other contracts out there depending on which country you are. And then also the risk factor that we had already mentioned prior. For instance, how much risk appetite does your client have, and as well as the contractor that is going to be taking the work, as well as in terms of cost certainty as well. Does the client actually want to go forward with a little bit of uncertainty in terms of the cost that they're going to finally incur? So there's quite a lot to consider, but I think that should basically be it with regards to approximate quantities. So thank you again for listening. Thank you for your support. We ask that you subscribe. I'm a Christian, so I'm praying. We ask that you subscribe and comment and like and share. Thank you.